If you're an architect working with ML systems, you already know the world has changed. It's not just about building the most powerful models anymore, right? Now, it's all about building models that are provably compliant. So today, we're going to dive deep into a blueprint for doing exactly that.
I mean, really think about this. This is the question that should be on every architect's mind. Imagine an auditor walks in and asks you to justify a specific decision your model made 3 years ago. I'm not sure just isn't going to cut it. This right here, this is the core challenge we're going to architect a solution for.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the why, the governance imperative. Then, we're going to build this thing from the ground up, starting with the foundation, which is data. We'll move on to the blueprint for models and workflows, then talk about being vigilant with monitoring, and finally, how to create that ironclad audit trail. We'll wrap it all up with a super practical checklist you can use in your very next review.
Okay, first things first, the governance imperative. And let's be clear, this is not a nice-to-have or some optional feature. If you're in finance, healthcare, or any regulated space, this is basically table stakes. It's a fundamental requirement for even being in business.
So what do we even mean when we say ML governance? It's not just buying a new tool. It's the entire framework, the people, the processes, the policies, all of it that you need to make sure your models are reliable, ethical, and compliant. Think of it as the complete operating system for control and transparency. To make this all a bit more real and less abstract, we're going to stick with one example throughout our discussion, a financial model that's making the call on loan applications. The stakes here couldn't be higher, the regulations are incredibly strict, and the need to prove everything is absolute.
And that leads us straight to the foundation of any system you're going to build, the data itself. You can't even begin to talk about a compliant model if you don't have compliant data. It's that simple.
This is the absolute bedrock principle. For any single prediction our loan model spits out, we have to be able to follow the breadcrumbs all the way back through the feature pipeline to the original source system, and prove that we have the right to use that data in the first place.
So how do we make that happen? Well, it really comes down to 3 key ideas. You've got data lineage, which is basically the map that shows you where did this data come from. Then there's consent management, which answers the question, were we even allowed to use it? And finally, feature stores, which act like a central governed library to make sure only approved, well-understood features get into your models.
And it's so important to get this. Data lineage is not just some techie tool for debugging code. It is the absolute prerequisite for being able to audit anything. It's the thread you pull that lets you unravel the entire story behind any decision your model makes. Without it, you're flying blind.
Okay, so our data foundation is solid. Now we can start building on top of it. Let's get into the blueprint for our models and workflows. This is where we move from managing data to engineering processes that are repeatable, transparent, and auditable.
You know, the biggest enemy of compliance is that random, ad hoc stuff. The data scientist training a model on their laptop with a CSV they got emailed. We've all seen it. Our job as architects is to completely replace that with a single, structured, fully automated pipeline. This pipeline becomes the only way to get a model into production, period.
And this structured path has critical gates, like checkpoints. First, every single model is versioned. Then it has to pass a gauntlet of automated tests, not just for performance, but crucially for fairness and bias. Only if it passes does it move to a human for a final business sign-off. Then, and only then, it gets locked into an immutable registry before it can be deployed.
And why is this so ridiculously important for our loan model? Because when that regulator asks about a decision from 2 or 3 years ago, you can't just show them the model you're running today. You have to be able to pull up the exact version, the code, the data, the model artifact that made that one specific decision back then. That's what this workflow gives you.
Okay, our model's deployed. We're done, right? Not even close. Now comes the vigilance. Governance doesn't stop when you go live. In fact, that's when some of the biggest risks pop up, because the real world is constantly changing.
See, a model is just a snapshot of the past. But the world moves on. The economy shifts, people's behaviors change, and this causes what we call drift. The data you're seeing in the real world no longer looks like the data you trained on. And that can quietly kill your model's performance, or even worse, introduce serious bias.
So what does this look like? Well, on the left, you see our baseline. Everything's running smoothly, approval rates are stable. But on the right, bam, an alert goes off. Our monitoring system just noticed that approval rates for a specific demographic have suddenly tanked.
That alert triggers an immediate investigation, letting us get ahead of the problem before it snowballs into a massive compliance headache. And this brings us to the grand finale, the culmination of everything we've built, the audit trail. This is where all that hard work pays off, because we've architected a system that provides undeniable proof of compliance.
Now, if you take one thing away from this section, let it be this. You cannot bolt on auditability at the end. It has to be a day-one design requirement. You can't just tell an auditor you're doing the right thing. Your architecture has to produce the cold, hard, verifiable evidence that proves it.
So, what does this evidence locker contain? Well, you need immutable versions of everything: data, code, the whole shebang. You need detailed logs of every training run. You need that model lineage we talked about. Every single inference request and response has to be recorded. And, critically, for high-stakes decisions, you need explainability reports that show why the model made that call.
This complete end-to-end trail, that is your ultimate defense. It's not a story you tell, it's a verifiable chain of evidence. It's how you demonstrate to any regulator that you have a mature, controlled, and fair process from start to finish.
Okay, let's bring it all home. We've covered a ton of ground, so let's distill it all into something you can actually use: the architect's checklist. These are the key questions you should be asking in your own design reviews, starting tomorrow.
I want you to take these 5 questions and walk into your next team meeting. Ask them. If your team has crisp, confident answers for every single one, you're in great shape. You're well on your way. But if you find some gaps, now you know exactly where you need to focus.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. As architects, we have a choice to make. Are we building opaque black boxes that nobody, including ourselves, can truly explain or defend? Or are we going to engineer transparent glass boxes, where every single decision, every piece of data, and every step in the process is visible, traceable, and auditable? The answer to that question is going to define the future of trustworthy AI.